everybody to the session Nurturing the Impact Power of Social Sciences, Humanities and the Arts. A quick journey through parts of Europe, obviously not covering whole Europe, but at least some countries. My name is Christoph Koller. I'm Managing Director of G&K, a company based in Germany, and I'm also the coordinator of the Special Interest Group Social Sciences, Humanities and the Arts at ASTP in the Netherlands, which is a kind of European praxis. Oral. What I would like to do today with you is, as soon as my presentation works, I know that we're here at the Aspect Festival 21. I know about the Aspect Network, and I know that there are some famous and very famous British and Scottish universities and Wallisian universities are part of it. And I understood that you are working on a toolbox, on good practices, on toolkits, on insights, on learning, on everything that helps to increase and to exploit the potential that is in social sciences, humanities, and the arts when it comes to commercialization and impact. And I have understood that this Aspect Festival 21 is an opportunity for this examination about how SSHA, social sciences, humanities, and the arts are tackling the most complex societal challenges of our time. So having that said, we thought it might be a good opportunity to have a look from the island to continental Europe in order to figure out what is going on in, we've called it Aspect Relevant Playground, covering topics like higher education institutions, universities, social sciences, humanities, and the arts, and impact. And of course, as I said, we will not be able to cover whole Europe, but we have selected a few examples that we would like to share with you. And afterwards, you might know a little bit more about what is going on in continental Europe, and you might perhaps even feel very good or even better because you see that what Aspect is doing is a kind of forerunning and exciting activity. So let me share some things with you. One thing that is really important, everything that has to do with social sciences, humanities, and the arts, impact, knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange, it has to do with people. And you see here some just very few, Frederick from Sweden, Barbara from Belgium, and Sabine from Luxembourg. Everything of these persons are really involved in the topic, and they are driving it. And that's very important. They are personal drivers behind this commercialization and impact activities, including a shift from technology transfer to knowledge transfer, and even more important nowadays, the tech transfer officers you see here on these photographs are willing, together with their academics, the academics they are working together with, to change the world to a certain extent. So that's quite an important lesson we constantly learn in continental Europe, and I know that there are some very similar approaches in the United Kingdom too. Another thing that's very important is enabling inter and multidisciplinarity. And one example of that are the knowledge transfer centers in Austria. The Austrian government has invested quite a significant amount of money in order to bring together the knowledge and technology transfer activities of engineering and natural sciences, together with the arts and social sciences and humanities. And you see here on this photograph, Georg Orsiker. He is based in Vienna, and he's very active in tying together these tying together these different disciplines in order to make the most of the potential of social science, humanities, and the arts, because sometimes these disciplines alone are not enough. An example from Germany is the University of Cologne has recently started a program that is called Excellent Startup Center. So what they are doing there is they have hired dedicated personnel that is acting as specific startup scouts for social sciences and humanities disciplines, which is probably know that not really easy, because the mindset of many academics in this area is not necessarily related to startups and spin-offs and starting a company. So what is also required besides this dedicated personnel is patience. So give things time, and taking my personal experience into account, 3 or 4 or 5 years will be not sufficient. There are many more examples in many other countries in Europe. I have selected just a few examples here. One that I really do like is the Hip for City project in Prague, which is right in the city center. The building of a lab. It's trying to bring together the academics from different disciplines, including very strongly social science, humanities, and the arts, in order to create impact. And based on that, I have to say that I do see two, from my point of view, trailblazing approaches in continental Europe, which I and we would like to share with you in this session here. One is a bit similar to the Hip for City, as I mentioned before, but it was the first really one in continental Europe. It's the Humanities Lab AVS in Amsterdam, which follows a simple but efficient strategy. If you would like to turn social science, humanities, and the arts into solution, you need a home. You need a home. And the idea is that Gerard Nijsten, who is meanwhile the director of the library at the University of Amsterdam, but he is the father of the idea of the Humanities Lab ABS. He is going to present you what he has been doing, and he will talk about his experiences. But before he will start that, I would like to share with you the other trailblazing approach, which is, you are very familiar with Impact in the UK, because you are the home of the REF, and many countries in Europe, in continental Europe, admire you because of that, but some of these countries are really frightened because of this development. And what I would like to share with you is that some people do not treat Impact as a threat, but they try to use it as a tool. And an example of that, including social sciences, humanities, and the arts, we identified at the Museum für Naturkunde in Berlin, Museum of Natural Sciences. And if we hopefully will be lucky enough, the Director General of the museum, Professor Johannes Vogel, is going to share his insights about this impact management approach with us. But before he's going to do that, I would thank you very much for your attention so far, and I would like to hand over to Gerard to share his experiences with the Humanities Lab AVS of Amsterdam. So Gerard, now the screen, not the floor, but the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to join and to share some experiences, lessons learned, and the follow-up of our Humanities Lab Amsterdam Venture Studio, established since 2016-17. And perhaps I should start with, let me see if it works. Yes. To start with some facts. As I said, we started the experiment in 2016. There is a total staff of 1.8 full-time positions that assists the starters, the director, and the business developer. And this spring we had 42 startups in the building that we developed, especially for the Amsterdam Venture Studio, Humanities Lab. But it's important to notice that there are mostly students, and I will come back to that later, because that's really an issue that keeps us, let's say, trying to make a next step. We offer 5 core activities in the Humanities Lab. It's offering coaching, teaching and developing entrepreneurship, connecting starters and researchers, setting up startups with clients, and finally, and very important as well, offering an inspiring working environment for these young people who want to set up their own business. There is a lot to say about this, but I would like to focus on 3 other topics this afternoon. First is the participation of academic staff. Second, the lessons learned from the first 5 years of this experiment. And third, we are now on the threshold of a new and decisive phase. How should we move on with this initiative? I would like to share some thoughts about that as well. I indicated already that we mainly interest students and alumni for the Humanities Lab, although it's also intended for academic staff. So why are they holding back? Where is the academic voice? And traditionally, we have 2 types of voices in academia. First is what I would call the classic academic voice. And a very good example of this classic academic voice is Professor Joep Leersen, professor of postmodern literature at our faculty. He is very much focused on research and societal impact. He's well known. He's a public figure. He gives lectures and is writing for a wide audience. He's very present in public media and social media as well. But in fact, he uses the classic channels to spread his knowledge and his results. And all his effort is a type of knowledge sharing without profit. It's not entrepreneurial. If you would be interested in being entrepreneurial, there is a second academic voice that is less fortunate. It's the academic voice of an individual, because if you have ideas and ambition to set up your own business within the university, very often the university doesn't offer you a home or support. And this happened to Dr. Els Kloek, a very acclaimed historian in the Netherlands. She has written a very successful book. She is a media personality, but she couldn't establish her dream within the university. And in the end, she left academia and set up her own business outside the university, and in this case, University of Utrecht. Frustrated, disappointed, and with lots of pain. And now, since then, she had to reinvent the wheel herself with lots of trial and error. So, if these 2 are the voices you hear mostly within academia, what do they show us, these examples? First, of course, societal impact is familiar ground, but mostly not in an economic way. And if so, entrepreneurship is hard work, it's a new terrain, it has a long learning curve, it's trial and error, and as you see with Els Kloek, it's lonely. So, and I'll come back to these academic voices later in my presentation. But first, what are lessons learned? What lesson can we draw from 5 years of experimenting in the Humanities Lab in Amsterdam? First of all, one needs help for an initiative like this. and we've got lots of help during the last years from the Technology Transfer Office, Amsterdam Center for Entrepreneurship, the Innovation Exchange Amsterdam, Executive Board of the Faculty of the University of Amsterdam, the UvA. And second, and Christoph mentioned it already, when you start, it's very important to be patient. It takes time to set up a lab like this. Don't judge an initiative too soon. It took us at least 3 times to gain the first momentum. And it means that you have to give trust and support to the initiative, to give freedom to experiment and freedom to fail. In some, you have to offer safety if you want to start with an initiative like that. And then coming back to the academic staff, why are there so few entrepreneurial academics in humanities? There are several barriers to overcome. First, it's time again. As you all know, a member of academic staff has to carry out research, education, administration, rules, bureaucracy, and there's very few time left for other things like societal impact. Second, there is this mentality that is very lively within the university, this mentality of an ivory tower, and the image of the entrepreneur. For many staff members, it's below their value to be an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur has a very bad reputation. And of course, these are mostly the older generations, but still it's quite dominant within the academia, especially within humanities. So we have to battle against this image. Then third, there's simply a lack of knowledge. It is hardly part of education or study. It is absolutely not within the humanities until 4 or 5 years ago. And then if you have finished your research, for instance, as a PhD student, and you want to use your knowledge and results for, let's say, your own business, how to start, they simply do not know where to begin and where to, on which door to knock. And more in general, overall, universities are still mainly focused on teaching and research, not on what is called in the Netherlands valorization or impact. Although this is legally in the Netherlands the third official task of each university, next to education, research, this valorization. And yet it's not very prominent within, especially not within humanities. So how do we overcome these barriers? There are assignments at various levels. In general, I already mentioned it, this societal impact, we have to constantly underline the fact that there is a third main task of the university and not something that lags behind research and education. For academics, it's very important that we have to adapt our evaluation system, not only to find out how we measure societal impact for their career, but also to value it and to change our reward structure, because now you are judged on your research output and on your education. And if you have an ambition as an academic, it doesn't help your career if you work on societal impact as a specific task. Your list of publications, your number of grants, that is really the other things that count for your career. And more fundamental, we have to reclaim and revest the humanities. We, humanities, we do matter, we always say. We are useful in many ways, but the idea and belief has arisen that humanities are interesting, but not useful. And this was exactly the idea behind the initiative to set up this Humanities Lab, to fight the prejudice that is still very lively against the humanities. It also means that we have to promote broad research teams with themes with a social orientation, and we have to work with stakeholders on so-called co-creation. And to be more specific and concrete, entrepreneurship should be part of the education curriculum. We have to train academics and students in knowledge transfer and value impact. We have to be more active in scouting, hunting for talents, and people involved early. And we have to focus on the younger generations of academics, for instance, the PhDs. As I said before, the ivory tower mentality is very lively among the older generations, and the younger are more open to, let's say, new perspectives. And finally, we have to take into account that our recruitment is now very often or only focused on scientific output and educational skills, but we also have to focus on skills to create impact. And that's a new element in the whole recruitment strategy of a university. So, having said all this, and then raises the question how we should go on, how we should go further. We finished our first phase, we are at the dawn of a new phase, and how could we guarantee sustainability? In Amsterdam, we have chosen for a specific approach, and I would call this embedding. And embedding means that we regard Humanities Lab as part of a broader approach. And it's set on 2 levels and focuses on 3 components. The first level is that we have to deepen the connection with the faculty. And for this, I will tell you a bit more later about the research building. Second level is connecting with society. And for that, we developed ecosystems and humanities in society. And allow me to tell you a bit more about these 3 new initiatives that will hopefully embed the Humanities Lab for the next phase. Let's start with the research building. It's actually a real building at the heart of the campus in the old city of Amsterdam. In the photograph at the right hand of this slide, you see part of that building. We are actually developing it right now. And its ambition is that it offers the state-of-the-art of facilities and services for research. It will bundle the existing labs that we have within the faculty. And the research building is to facilitate cooperation, co-creation with partners from inside and outside UvA. And the research building has to stimulate research-based education. And finally, and here it is again, the Humanities Lab will be embedded and housed in this research building. The idea behind this is that research can be seen as a chain, and that Humanities Lab is part of this chain. To our conviction, there is an unbroken line of more fundamental research through intermediate links into economic application of research results. Thus, the Humanities Lab has to be close to the sources of knowledge, data, and its results. Just to very briefly, there are 3 types of participants in this research building. The existing labs that are now located across the Humanities campus in Amsterdam: Linguistics Lab, Create Lab, Media Lab, 4D Lab, Reconstruction Lab, Conservation and Presentation Lab. They all share facilities and expertise within this new building. It's also a matter of scaling up and trying to get more efficiency, but also facilitating interdisciplinarity. The second participant is education, of course, the College of Humanities and Graduate School, and then third, the Humanities Lab. We will also cooperate with several other partners. The Allard Pierson, it's the museum and the heritage collection of the UvA. It's Royal Academy of Sciences, the City of Amsterdam, the University of Applied Sciences, and the Amsterdam Museum. And the list will hopefully become longer in the course of the next period. So that's the first thing, the research building. Then I would like to tell you a bit more about ecosystems. First of all, why do we need ecosystems, and what is an ecosystem actually? Why do we need it? Well, the main problem for the humanities is that we are difficult to read, if I might call it in this and put in this way, for outsiders, for external partners. We are so diverse, so there are so many disciplines, there's such a level of specialization that it hinders the collaboration with external partners. So we are not readable. And for that, we developed ecosystems. But then what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is the composite of 4 aspects on a campus. And the figure on the left side of this slide shows it in Dutch, I'm sorry. But it's, of course, research, it's education, it's the infrastructure that's available, and society, the partnerships. If these 4 are all well developed, you have a rich environment for growth, a fruitful interaction between not only education and research, but also with the society, let's say it more precise, with external partnerships, and growth of the campus can be enhanced. How does it look? Something like this. On the basis of the strength and profile of our existing research, we defined 4 ecosystems: humane digital transition, diversity in society, the creative human, and a bit more local, cultural texture Amsterdam. These 4 are let's say, the result of lots of research programs. And you see around these 4 circles, lots of research programs on every of the 4 ecosystems. And if I would have time to go further, deeper in this ecosystem, you could see a slide with all the partnerships, a slide with the infrastructure, a slide with the educational programs, and all these 4 let's say, compose elements, they together form this ecosystem. And on the basis of that, these 4, we can easily be linked to social issues, big social themes, and they offer external partners an entry to the faculty with its multiple disciplines. Which brings me to my last element that we use for embedding the humanities lab and to embed the research and education. It's the Humanities and Society organization, a linking pin that makes the whole work. It's a very small organization that helps us to get into contact with external partners and set up partnerships. Connection of social partners with research and talent is very active in scouting and looking for chances and possibilities, and promotes communication. And this little organization also offers its services to Humanities Lab. So, to sum up, the triangle research building, ecosystems, and humanities and society offers to our idea, a very sustainable embedding of the Humanities Lab. And we hope that we can develop this lab further with the help of this triangle. So thank you very much. This was my small presentation.
Thank you very much, Gerard, for this excellent presentation. I really do like this Humanities Lab approach. I know that Aspect is, at least in Cardiff, doing something similar with Spark. It's an approach going into the same direction, but I remember the stories you were telling me about the barriers you had to overcome with all the difficulties, and that impressed me really, really much. I got a few comments. Actually, I got 2.5 comments, 2 of them coming from Bruce, talking about the academics which are already active. Bruce, would you like to comment on it? There was someone named Bruce in the, if not sure, I can unmute. Okay. that's an issue. But anyway, we may postpone it.
No, the host just let me unmute.
Well, so just one or two sentences on your comments, please.
Yes, certainly. Yes, there is a small, but I think growing and hopefully influential number of academics who are working now in the field of social enterprise. There was an early paper that I mentioned in the chat easily 10 years ago by Hazy and Goldstein and others. And these things are starting to get traction. And I think that there are, and certainly in the UK and in the Netherlands, I mentioned others in the chat. The topics you describe, I think, are really relevant, important, and timely.
Yeah, it is as it is in real life. It's the same as Gerard told us, and the same experience I get in several countries in Europe. You always have to start with a willing minority, and that is what Gerard did very successfully. I would like to thank you very much to this point, and if everyone agrees, I would like to hand over to Johannes Vogel. He will probably briefly introduce himself very soon. And he's going to talk about this other approach I really see as a trailblazing one, which is turning impact into a weapon and to take it very aggressively positively. So Johannes, please, the screen is yours.
Christoph, thank you. Do I show my presentation, or will somebody from the team put that on?
You may share your slide, your presentation, please.
Okay, let me just do that.
That's one of the few words that are really new during this pandemic. Share screen, or please unmute, or do things like that. So, Johannes, please.
So yes, I'm not going to be unmute for the next few minutes. So thank you very, very much indeed for being able to share our thoughts with you. So my name is Johannes Vogel. I'm a geneticist by training, UK educated. Joined the museum in Berlin 10 years ago. I'm German by birth. And one of my main topics, being in this leadership position in the last 10 years, has been change management and organizational development. That's one of the things I really like, and especially changing scientific organizations. Not so much in the realm of excellence, but perhaps trying to look at the combination between being excellent and being relevant. And I think that is a trick that science is missing. So for my sins, I'm president of the European Citizen Science Association. I've advised the EU Commission. I'm as chair of the Open Science Policy Platform. I'm a member of the High Tech Forum of the German government. So all of these type of areas where one can look at what is working in the broader field, perhaps outside of tight academic institutions, but also perhaps put some interesting anarchic thoughts in. So I'm just coming from a meeting of German junior ministers. As you may know, COVID is accelerating a lot of things. So they are looking for fresh thinking, and relevance and participation and openness, especially in the science system and in the innovation system, seems to be fairly high on the agenda. And I think we all know why, because the stale set systems have not really performed that well for the population. These are all areas where I think what we are talking here today about how humanities, how the smart approaches, the way you think or humanities think can be merged, can be utilized to form a synthesis with perhaps natural science thinking. So how can one, if one wants to, have progress with principles? Because what we see a lot is progress without principles, and only a rich continent like Europe can afford that. But whether we stay rich or whether COVID is going to eat our resources is all up in the balance. And then once COVID is over, climate change and or even worse, biodiversity loss are going to hit us fairly hard. So we are a research museum. So despite the fact that we have a huge public offering in Berlin, I'm in the science funding stream of the German government. So therefore, I'm perhaps not that far away from many of you. But in the last 10 years, we've started to create an interdisciplinary research organization. So we've added a quite substantial department of social sciences in order to increase the self-reflective capacity of the organization, but also in order to see what type of impact we can achieve. So we have a very simple brand and logo for nature. You see that also in the top right, and it is in the handwriting of Alexander von Humboldt, whose collections we hold in this museum, but also whose spirit of universality of science is quite imbued in him and his brother, who, as you know, was a comparative linguist. So having Humboldt in the name is not a bad thing. So for nature, deepening research, communicating results, and funny, changing society, because without biodiversity, we are not going to go far on this planet. So we have to have an activist approach, but that is perhaps not necessarily the prerogative or the skill set of natural scientists. So we need to broaden our approach. Here you can see some of the stuff we have to deal with. We are certainly mission orientated, which is probably different from a lot of universities. We are also structured while we run a very open and agile management structure with flat hierarchies and all the stuff that smart people want and desire. We also can have people held to account for their actions. That is the advantage of running an extra university institute instead of a university. We've also, due to our increasing reach and impact, been able to persuade both parliaments at the German Bundestag and at the city of Berlin to fund us at this moment to the tune of 710 million euros extra on top of what we get normally, in order to see whether we can create an experimental space that may help society to move forward. That's a huge trust and investment in our future, and it will not be done on business as usual. So we have to be smart in order to stay ahead. And as we all are, we are fighting with all the different issues that we deal with. But for us, while we are being measured like any academic institution, input, output, there is also for us very much, and we experience it in our daily lives with our visitors coming through our door, the question of relevance. If we are not relevant to them, they might not come. Well, now they couldn't come with COVID, but apart from that, that is a daily measure, perhaps a measure that many other scientific organizations miss or lack, and I think they are not better off for that. So I think where we want to go is not always looking backwards at what we try to measure, but perhaps being able to lead And for that, you need to look forward, not backward. So that means instead of reporting impact by looking at measures, outputs, we perhaps may want to look at how we can align our activities with impact goals and then manage impact actively. And of course, if you take these big sentences that we aspire to, then of course you are very, very quickly with the Sustainable Development Goals, which give us actually a very smart, holistic approach to looking at the world and its future, because there's no future for nature without social justice. And without social justice and equitable sharing, we will have issues preserving the natural world that in turn again carries mankind. So all of these things need to be looked together, and they are very well described in the Sustainable Development Goals. So if we look at impact and how we want to measure it, we can take the Sustainable Development Goals most closely aligned to our work, and I'm sure that all of your organizations can find similar hooks in the Sustainability Development Goals if you look carefully enough. But these are, for example, three. The One Health issue, I think very big on everybody's agenda, preservation of biodiversity on land and in the seas, and the education for sustainable development. These would be three of the topics that we do. And these are actually also three topics to which our research speaks, or to which we conduct experiments. So that is a natural fit to us. However, we haven't, because every organization develops in stages, we haven't reached that point yet. And so we want to really look at facilitating this change now. And here is the type of agenda that we will want to look at, from excellent research to enabling the relevant change in MFN impact areas, engaging of stakeholders, and so on and so forth. So it's quite a steep agenda, but this theory of change is for us a very good conceptual framework, and it aligns then very closely to our three goals. Here is a type of process we now envisage, and we are currently in the process of enabling this through MFN internal resources and hopefully also some external funding, because it appears to us to be quite a smart experiment that others hopefully can learn and share into. Yes, it won't be an easy way. It will hit institutional and other barriers, but that's what everybody hits when you engage in the process of change, and so be it. So it's a reflective way. It goes both ways, and it needs to work in that. So again, the question of culture in an organization to facilitate the flow of information and learning from one to the other is important. As you know, culture has strategy for breakfast anyway. So that's a good one. Yes, and if you look at Sustainable Development Goals and the type of stuff that we want to do, then especially your field, the humanities, the arts, is a fantastic link between all what needs to be achieved to facilitate change in organizations and or for the world through Sustainable Development Goals. We are going to build a interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, so engaging the public as well, campus on the theme of nature and society. For me, it's a better word than anthropocene. Nobody knows what that is. Scientists very often find very smart words that exclude others from thinking about it. So this is, for example, why we have focused on the theme of nature, which also opens many perspectives and meanings, tacit as well as institutional or structured knowledge, and so on and so forth, instead of talking about biodiversity or other words that people think is a soap. So there's a lot to do, and especially a lot to learn from your skills and ambitions. So here is where we are at. But as I said, the ongoing challenges for you and certainly for us will be the internal cultural change in light of these challenges, and then how to develop a robust impact metrics that again can really deliver in the real world and for the institution. And with that, I would like to say thank you for your attention, and very happy to answer questions if I can.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for sharing this exciting strategy with us. Is there any question in the audience for Johannes? Because if not, just in case, I would like to start with one question, because Johannes, you're trying to change the rules of the game a bit, at least a bit, and you're doing that in a country that likes to think in boxes. So for Germans, everything is always clear and straightforward. So coming to this idea of an impact management, from your point of view and from your experiences, what are the main challenges for you to proceed?
So I'm part of one of the German extra-university research strands called Leibniz Association. It's one of four: Helmholtz, Fraunhofer, and Max Planck are the others. Leibniz is probably one of the poorest or the poorer of these strands, but as a director, I have the greatest freedom of all of them. So that means that, like the slogan of Berlin, poor but sexy, my job is actually quite exciting, because we have freedom to move and freedom to experiment. And if you are poor, you have to experiment, because otherwise you don't get the resources to deliver your dreams. So this is why we eventually found the way to get the sovereign of Germany, the parliament, to persuade us to fund it, as there was no other way in the system. So what I'm saying is one just has to be imaginative, creative, but also deliver a pretty good performance in both science and relevance in order to gain the freedom to do that. But that can only be done if you have a workforce, if you have a team that is behind these ideas, because they will be, in the end, the advocates, the ambassadors of where you want to go. And that, I think, was the challenge of the first 6 years. Even though I think we took over one of the best teams in the world, they still needed a frame, they still needed a bit of a mind shift. And once you've accomplished that, once you have an organization that is courageous, that is dynamic, open, and has a culture where mistakes are actually being encouraged and used to learn, then I think the rest becomes much, much more easier. But if you are in a risk-adverse culture that penalizes mistakes or perceived mistakes, so all the things that would never, ever happen in Germany, of course, then at least not in academia. No, I mean, Germany is a developing country in many aspects when it comes to organizational development in science. But if you have a different culture, you can go far, I would argue.
That's partly an answer to one of the questions we received, which is about how could we facilitate a cultural change. But before we will go again to this question, I would like to take another one, which is where what, Gerard and Johannes, so the question is directed to the two of you, which first steps did you take in being more engaged with these ventures, it as moving beyond academia? The question coming from Ali.
So if you're a scientific institution within a 65,000 square meter estate, of which 5,000 are public space, then you do meet about 3,000, 5,000 people a day. However, if you just invite them to entertain themselves, you're really missing a trick. So we've had a very, very strong program of deepening our relationship with our visitors, and that was based on our science, not on gimmicks. And Berlin is actually quite a fascinating town. The more science, the more complex issues we put on for dialogue, the more people we get. So pre-COVID, we had 2% of the Berlin adult population engaged with us in dialogue about the future of the world a year. 2%. I don't know any museum, I don't know any science organization that gets anywhere near that figure, 2% of the local population in in-depth dialogue. That didn't happen from one day to the next. It took us about 8 years to get there, but one can get there. And did we do everything right? Definitely not. Did we do mistakes? Yes. Did we learn from them? You believe it.
Thanks a lot, Johannes. Gerard, would you like to jump into, please, to this question?
Well, actually, my answer would be much more personal compared to the answer of Professor Vogel. For me, things started with the idea that there was such a strange contrast between the different, let's say, areas of sciences and within academia. There was a very strong effort on either makes things economic, the let's say the use of data, the use of results, simply to make society better, and on the other hand, you had these areas like humanities that were seen as nice to have but not need to have. So I thought to myself, well, we have to change that because we are all as relevant as we all can be, each within its own disciplines and its own expertise. So I thought myself, what if we simply prove that we can be useful as well? And hopefully that somebody from the sciences can say that he is meaningful as well. Same. That would be a big step forward. And that's exactly how I started with this initiative.
Excellent. That I really do like that.
I can fully echo that. So the way to our money was the journey from nice to have to necessary. Politics, society only invests in opportunities. It doesn't invest in necessities. And science always think that if they talk about their necessities, everybody will fall to their knees and shower them with money. If you talk about necessities, everybody has necessities. The police station needs a new toilet. The professor needs a new assistant. How is a politician or anybody to judge that? If you talk about opportunities, if you talk about futures, if you talk about your relevance, and if you deliver a service that others then start to need, then you are on the way to necessity, and then you're on the way to funding or opportunities.
Thank you. Although being very carefully now, I would like to raise the second part of Michael's question, which is, what could we, and I think we means probably the UK system, I guess, what could we learn from Germany and the Netherlands? To say very briefly, is there anything, Gerard and Johannes, is there anything you feel be entitled to recommend to your colleagues in the UK?
Well, I still live in the UK.
That's not my question.
I still live in the UK. I used to live in the UK full time for 23 years, and I've just returned. I'm currently in quarantine, having just returned after 7 months in the UK. Science is in a pickle in the UK. Humanities, I think, even more. One example, which is a UK example, it might be a myth, but it might be a true story, is Rothamsted. So I'm a plant geneticist, and Rothamsted is a science organization that has conducted long-term experiments. So value from that science is long-term and observational instead of instant and eureka. And they were always fearing that they would get into the chop, that they would be getting the chop since Maggie Setcher arrived, and ever since. And they developed a huge outreach program, a dialogue program with their local communities. And funnily enough, when the call from the ministry came, they could really fend that off very swiftly, because the whole community and the MPs got up in arms, and the last thing they wanted to see culled is Rothamsted Research Station. So make time to engage with your local publics. Another interesting story from my time in the UK is the MP of Sheffield North once told me that when there was an issue on steel, he had about 2,000 representations on that issue, because there was some steelworks in North Sheffield. When there was an issue on genetic engineering and medicine, about also same amount of jobs affected by these changes, he had no representation from science. So if science just talks to itself and looks at peer review and other measures, instead of engaging actively with politics and with the public, life becomes more difficult. It takes time away from what we think we need to do. I would recommend open yourself up, make yourself available 1 day a week to engage and learn to listen to others, and then you will be listened to.
Very good. Gerard, anything to add to that?
No, I think the last sentence was so philosophical. I say I don't dare to add something to that. But we have a long way to go in the Netherlands as well. So don't think that the situation is better in the Netherlands. We have lots of battles to come, I think.
That brings me perhaps to a kind of wrap up, because we are running out of time now. The idea of this session was not to cover whole Europe and not to bring over any truth. It was just about selecting some, from my point of view, really interesting approaches that come together with two really interesting persons who were presenting it and who are behind these approaches. And please take it as a kind of inspiration or as a kind of just saying confirmation we are really good. So whatsoever, take it as it is. I would like to thank the panelists, Gerard and Johannes, very much for sharing your time and your insights with us. I know time is a highly valued resource. So I thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers for taking care of us very much, for helping people like me who is a digital Flintstone. And of course, I would like to thank the attendees very much for joining our session. So have a good afternoon. Enjoy the remaining part of the festival. Hope to see you once again somewhere. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.